Hey, welcome to Hope Rescue Podcast. Obviously, this is not my wife, Kimberly, but this is my brother, Phil Scott, and he's down visiting and helping out with some things we do with Hope Rescue. But I thought, hey, he's here, so why not have him on, right?
Very happy to be here.
Yeah, Kimberly would say something about his gray beard, and then we would move on. Actually, she would tease both of us as she
Indeed.
does, she's known to do on a regular basis. So we obviously grew up in the same family. We're brothers, and even though I was always told I was adopted, why did you guys do that? You tortured me all the time about that stuff.
It was the right thing to do.
It was the right thing to do. All right. So, we had same parents, and my parents were married till my dad passed. And then, so we have similar experiences, but it's interesting with 6 kids how all of the kids have a different view of what it was like to grow up in Bill and Pat Scott's house. And they kind of changed their parenting style throughout that time and so forth. The youngest ones probably got the better parents. That's the way it is for us. My oldest children are like, you're a better father now. We got gypped. Yeah, right. Well, it's called maturity, right? Yeah. And the reality is that parents are leaders. And I thought it would be great to have Phil come. Phil is my younger brother. He has pastored for a short period of time. He has education in Bible. He has good Bible knowledge. And but he went into business. And for years, he has led in some, what's the most people you led that you were a supervisor for?
The last job, I had 1,500 employees.
1,500 employees. Never had that many employees, so I don't know about that. But, leading people is really difficult. But, it's, when you're the older brother, you always see your younger brother as just a kid, and we kind of a little bit disconnect for a while in adulthood, and then we've reconnected, and I'm like, hey, he kind of grew up and he became a great leader. And so I thought it'd be good to talk about leadership. And we'll see how this evolves. I'll kind of get into this at different levels. Maybe we'll talk about how parenting and leadership in corporate world works. There's some similarities. Questions that come to my mind is, how to get cast a vision. How do people catch a vision? How do you motivate people? Use positive and negative controls. How do you invest in an organization in such a way that the people you're leading really want to be a part of that organization? The great book, Phil, that was written called Good to Great by Jim Collins. And he really talked about the different levels of leaders. Yeah. The lowest level is a guy that can do a job and faithfully do it. Other guys, you move up, but the top level 5 leader is a person that has 2 really strong characteristics. They are both humble. They listen to what people say. We're going to get into that in a little bit. But also they understand the mission and vision of the organization, and they're tenaciously given to that. So what I'm going to do, what I thought might be helpful is, now that I've kind of introduced Phil to you, is to ask you, Phil, a couple of questions. The first one is this: what is the difference between a leader and leadership? Everybody wants to be a leader. Or maybe we'll put it this way: everybody wants to be in leadership, but not everybody's a leader. What's the difference between a leader and leadership?
It's a really good question, and it's interesting how all of us have different life experiences in this regard. A leader sometimes is just by position, has no skill.
Yeah.
He or she just happened to get there, and positionally they're a leader. But leadership is actually the ability of a leader to motivate people, to engage people,
Right.
That actually understands and has the ability to lead. And by the way, all leaders lead either positively or negatively.
Yeah.
When you're doing something, if it's negative, that's leadership in the wrong direction.
Yeah. That's true. I would say that's true in the home too.
Yes.
So you had a child, you and your spouse had a child, and you go, okay, we got a child. I'll be a parent. Well, you need to be a leader in your home. And what does it take to be a leader? Just because you're a parent doesn't make you a leader. I've known a lot of fathers and a few mothers, but mostly fathers that were not leaders, and they didn't give the kind of care and consideration of their children that they should have. So just being in a position doesn't make you a leader.
Right.
It does make you in a position of leader. I'm trying to remember who I heard this from. Somebody said, you should not wait till you have the position of leadership to be a leader. You lead from where you are. Actually, I think it was Andy Stanley, but that's not important. I'll take the credit for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you lead from where you are? You ever thought about that? Leading from where you are.
You know, I'll take you back to a life experiences, which is really where I started my leadership roles. And that is when I was in the Marine Corps, I was standing in a platoon along with 70 other men.
Yeah.
And the gunnery sergeant that was in charge of that group came out and said, who wants to be in charge?
Wow.
And in the Marine Corps, you always led with your left foot.
Yeah.
And my left foot all of a sudden did something I was not prepared for emotionally or intellectually. It took a step forward.
Wow. Did
And
anybody else?
No one else. I looked in my peripheral
You're
vision
standing
and
there
no
by
one
yourself
moved.
going, wait a minute, I'm out here by myself.
You know, it's interesting, that one step actually created the hallmark of my career, is constantly taking that step when no one else was going to.
Yeah.
And I ended up being in charge of those 70 guys. I assigned work duties instead of being assigned. And it was actually a very good experience for me and what it did for me while I served in the Marine Corps.
Were you scared when you were standing there, you taking this step? Were you like, what am I doing?
Oh boy. You know, I really did. I thought this could be really bad for me, could be really good for me.
Yeah.
On that day, I was promoted. So at that point, it was really good for me.
Yeah.
So, but it created a desire in me to strive.
Were you trained after you stepped forward? Did you get some training to help you understand, or you just
Absolutely nothing.
So you're just told, okay, give these directives and
You know, I guess to understand my training, I go back to our childhood days. My dad and mom were both very strong leaders. They understood leadership. Now, I'm a businessman. Tim's a pastor. My dad was probably the least of businessmen.
he was a pastor.
He was a pastor,
He was.
so he must have favored Tim.
Yes.
He didn't help me in that regard. No, but he did help me in that regard because I learned ethical behavior.
Yeah.
I learned how to treat people in the appropriate way to treat people.
Yeah.
How to love people.
Yeah.
And how not to put myself in front of everybody else, and more about putting the mission forward.
Right.
So we got a lot in our upbringing that as soon as I got an opportunity to lead, leading seemed natural because we were trained in it from the time we were in diapers.
I think all six of us, there's six of us, one is passed, but he was a leader. Dan was a leader.
Definitely.
And he was a warrant officer. What was he?
CW04.
CW04. Actually, I should know that. I got a hat that has it on there. But he was a helicopter pilot, and he was teaching other people. So he was a leader. You've been a leader. I've been a leader. Dave was a leader. Becky is a leader. Mickey's a leader. So all of us really got involved in leadership, and I think there's a level of confidence that comes with that. But confidence is maybe not the most important character trait. And we talked about this ahead of time. So I told you I was going to ask this. What is the most important character trait of a leader?
You know, I and I'm going to go to the scripture on this because I think
We don't go to scripture. We don't. We
it's
don't do
important
Bible
to
here.
fully understand. This has been a lifetime passage for me
Yeah.
that I learned when I was a young man. Spent a great deal of time studying
Yeah.
in this particular passage, and it's Philippians chapter 2, verses 1 through 8. So, in a nutshell, it's humility.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna go ahead and read this. So, if you'll indulge me.
Oh yeah, it's good.
Therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and in mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, very important part of this passage. Rather, in humility, value others above yourself, not looking on your own interests, but on each of you the interests of the others. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset that Christ Jesus had, who being in the very nature of God did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing to take on the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in the appearance as man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even on the cross.
Yeah.
And I think back and I think what he did was such a good example for all of us on how we should conduct, not just at business, but in our homes.
Yeah.
And putting people before our own needs. I think oftentimes, and we probably all that have adult children have said this, that, boy, why couldn't I know then what I know now?
Yeah.
I
I've
could
said
have
that
been
a few times.
could have been a really cool dad.
Yeah.
At any rate, just this humility and knowing that Jesus Christ had the right to be whatever went along with being
Yeah.
in the Godhead, and he chose to take on being a man.
That's leaders that are all about position are not leaders like Christ, because Christ had the position of full equality with God. He took on the human experience and took on the form of a servant. That is a powerful step down. Yeah. I mean, it's the ultimate step down. So us going from, hey man, I'm a good communicator. I know how to figure out the books. I know how to, I'm good at strategy. Yeah. The problem is, if you don't care about people, it's really not going to do any good.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
so
it's an interesting topic. If the folks watching the podcast today are avid readers,
yeah.
The book by Greenleaf on servant leadership
Oh yeah.
is really good to point up what a servant leader is.
Yeah.
That your goal is to serve those that are working for you.
Yeah.
And it's a powerful way to approach work. And if you want people to really excel and do better and make the mission get achieved, then you have to motivate them, and you're going to motivate them because they'll get to a point where they care about you.
Yeah.
And for me, I have often said that, people have said, well, Phil, you've had a very successful career. The last business I managed was about $60 million a year.
Yeah.
And in that work, I got a lot of awards. And every time I accept an award, I recognized it is not me that got that award. It is my team that achieved that award, and I just happen to be receiving the plaque.
Yeah.
And so as such, I always made sure to pass that compliment on to my staff.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones that made it happen. So it's very important to understand what your role is as a leader and always making sure you put the other.
Yeah, one of the things that our listeners don't know, actually, you might know because I've mentioned this before. Phil is a servant, and he was a leader, leading a lot of men and women and so forth. But he's the kind of servant that I used to say, kind of a little hyperbole. If I was in New York and I got a flat tire, I could call Phil, and he'd come from Seattle and fix my tire. And I mean, that shows that I'm kind of lazy and don't know what I'm doing. And Phil is willing to come and fix. But he is a servant. He's got a servant's heart. I've seen him do that in many ways. He takes pleasure in that. Humility is saying, what does that person need? Not what do I need? And a lot of leaders don't share the glory of accomplishment. They take it for themselves. And that's exactly the opposite of what Jesus did.
Yeah.
So,
I've had some great mentors in my career, and some of those mentors, they're Christians like I am, and you'll find, and I'm sure everyone's had a life experience that authenticates this, a lot of Christians are not Christians at work.
yeah.
They're Christians at church. They're Christians in their neighborhood. But when it comes to work, it's more about that competitive eye.
Yeah.
If I were to say what the hallmark of my success was in business world, is I was able to select good people with strong ethical standards.
Yeah, that's good.
And I wasn't the smartest, but I could surround myself with the best.
Well, for the sake of time, let me get on to this last thing that I wanted to talk to you about, and that is the character traits of a leader. And I know you wrote some down, and why don't you kind of share with us as many as we can get through in the time allotted? Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Well, one of the first ones is to have an unwavering courage based on your self-confidence. You got to have a vision. You need, it's often said, if you don't have a target, you'll miss it every time.
Yeah.
And so creating a bullseye that works, and then believe in it. If you believe in it, you'll achieve it.
Yeah.
And you'll help motivate those people that are going to help you achieve it. You'll get them motivated toward the same thing. The next one is have self-control. How many people have a difficult time bridling their tongue?
Yeah.
And they, sometimes you've got to be quiet and just listen.
Yeah, we talked about that last week on the podcast, how important it is to be, to have a gracious speech out of Colossians 4:5, to actually have a goal of listening to what people are saying and respond to what they're saying instead of saying, and you're talking about vision and speaking, you could go, this is what I want to get accomplished, so listen what I have to say, instead of saying, where's this person going to fit in? Anyway, go ahead.
It's an interesting thing that there's a lot of pressures in business. And as a leader, you have to be impervious to those pressures. And, we often use the expression, don't ever let them see you sweat.
Yeah.
And as a leader, even though the pressure is very high and very intense, your folks need to believe that you're in control and there's no issues.
Yeah.
And that's a real big and very difficult thing to achieve. I think the next one is the thing that most people can identify with from a perspective of their life experience and work, and that is to have a leader be fair.
Yeah.
I have learned, and I've unfortunately had to terminate many people over my lifetime. But I always made it a goal in my heart and mind that I would have that termination meeting with that employee, and I would help them understand and try to make it a learning experience so they didn't encounter the same thing somewhere else.
Yeah.
So always let that employee lead or leave the office where they're not embarrassed and they can hold their head up.
Yeah.
So talk about the good things.
Yeah, a lot of people in, that classic exit interview, are basically tell them how worthless they are, then send them out instead of saying, hey, these are the 5 things you could do to fix this.
Yeah.
So that's really good. What's next?
The next one I would go to is don't wait for the perfect answers to make a decision. I think so many leaders are looking at their situation, whether it has to do with the financial well-being of their business division, or whether it has to be with an HR issue or something. They're constantly looking for the perfect answer. And if you do that, you basically lose your edge.
Yeah.
Ships can't be turned by their rudder when they're not moving. And you got to be moving in order for that propeller to have an impact and that rudder actually steer the ship.
Yeah.
And
That's
so
good.
it's important that you do that. Make decisions. Don't be afraid to make a decision. And your people deserve no less, and the company that you serve deserve no less. Next on that line is have a plan.
Yeah.
It's back to that having a target. If you don't have a plan for how you're going to conduct business or how you're going to achieve, then you're not going to get there.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to checklist what you're going to do,
Yeah.
think about it, and then troubleshoot it. We used to have a program called TQM. TQM it's basically a root cause analysis of why things go right or why things go wrong.
Yeah.
And it's using a Pareto chart, which is a fishbone chart, that instead of trying to solve the random issues, you try to get down to what the root cause of the issue is.
Yeah.
And so this is all together with a plan and digging down.
Yeah. One of the things I coach a few pastors, and one of the things I say is, you need to have, a clear mission. You need to know what your mission is. You've got to have a vision how to reach that mission. And so let's say you set a 5-year goal or a 10-year goal. If at my age, you don't do that, we don't try to go beyond 5, but anyway, say you have a 5-year goal and you go, okay, I'm going to reach that. The problem is if you don't have all the steps that lead to that, and that's that plan, you have to have a detailed plan. What's my next step? Not what's my 10th step. What's my next step so that I can reach that goal? So you have to work. You start there, but you got to work all the way back to where you're standing, and that's your plan.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's one of the things that a lot of people don't get is when you're the boss, you have the liberty to do whatever you wish.
Right.
But if you're going to be a leader while being the boss, you should always do more than anybody else.
Yeah.
I never would require somebody to do something that I would not do myself.
Yeah.
And that's all part of modeling the way and engaging with your employees.
Yeah. That's good.
And one of the next points that comes up to that, and it seems basic and it seems simple, but a lot of people don't get this right. And that is just be likable.
Yeah.
If people like you, they're going to want you to be pleased with their performance.
I have Kimberly for that. I don't, Kimberly is well liked, and I'm with her. So that works for me.
Susie Sunshine. Yeah. It's interesting, back to having that plan. Tim actually taught one of the classes that I was in when I was going through Bible college, and it was about coming up with a subject purpose statement for my message.
Yeah.
And what are the takeaways?
Yeah.
I think that's really important as a manager, not just for a message preparation, but for how you conduct business.
Yeah, and this is important for parents as well. Some of you are not in a leadership role in work, and maybe you don't even work outside your home, you work independently. Let me say, if you have children and you set goals for them, and that's important, you say, this is what I'd like to see little Johnny be when he's 25 years old. Well, what's going to get you there? What's the plan that's going to get you there? And then you've got to model that for them. You've got to be willing to do what you're asking them to do. And it's really unfortunate. A lot of parents don't get that. Raising children is not just surviving their teen years. Raising children is developing godly, mature men and women. And same is true with leadership. you got to be clear where you're going, how you're getting there.
I would say another area, and I think this is equally as important as the others, is being sympathetic. And I said, yes, sympathetic, not empathetic.
Yeah.
You need to really understand where people are coming from.
Right.
And you may not fully be able to understand their life experience.
Yeah.
So you've got to have sympathy for what they might be going through.
Right.
And so the next one is paying attention to detail. This is an important fact on running a business, is you just can't let those details fall through the cracks. And I think one of the last things I would highlight on these traits is, as a leader, you have to assume the responsibility. Whether it's good or bad, when it's good, I always make sure we recognize the people that were part and parcel.
Yeah.
When it's bad, it stops with me.
Yeah.
So I just assume that role and say, that's all me.
Yeah. That is really good advice. A lot of people take the credit when it goes well and blame others when it goes poorly. It's just the opposite of what you should do. Well, those are really good. Thank you for sharing those. And I want to thank you for listening to Hope Rescue Podcast. I just say, for those of you who listen to this podcast on leadership, start to apply these in your personal relationships, in your family, and at work. Even if you're not in a position of leadership, they will put you in a good stead. Phil, thanks for coming. Thanks for coming all the way down to San Diego so you could do the podcast. Okay, he's here for other reasons. But anyways, great advice, great input. Hope you enjoy your week. We'll see you next week on Hope Rescue Podcast.